I'm Elena Castellano, 38, founder and CEO of Aurora Financial Technologies, with a personal net worth of $500 million after 12 years of what I believed was a deeply loving marriage to my husband Marcus, a prominent investment banker. I discovered he was secretly orchestrating our divorce while simultaneously planning to claim half of everything I'd built. What I did next from my home office in the hills of Monterey completely dismantled his scheme before he even knew I was aware of it. Before we dive back in, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And if this story resonates with you, don't forget to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is something truly special I can't wait to share. Growing up as the youngest of 4 daughters in a modest household in Sacramento, California, I learned early that nothing in life comes easy. My father, Roberto, worked double shifts at the local manufacturing plant, while my mother, Carmen, cleaned offices downtown to make ends meet. Money was always tight, but my parents had an unwavering belief in education as the great equalizer. Mija, my father would say every morning as I left for school, "Your mind is the one thing no one can ever take from you. Use it wisely." Those words would prove to be prophetic in ways I never could have imagined. While my 3 older sisters were focused on typical teenage pursuits, I was captivated by numbers and patterns. I'd spend hours analyzing our family's budget, finding ways to save money, and even helped my neighbors with their tax returns when I was just 15. My bedroom walls weren't decorated with celebrity posters. They were covered with financial charts and business magazine clippings. My parents didn't understand my obsession with finance and economics, but they supported it wholeheartedly. When I expressed interest in attending UC Berkeley for business and economics, they worked extra jobs to help me save for college. My mother even started a small catering business from our kitchen, making tamales and selling them to local construction crews. The sacrifice wasn't lost on me. Every late night I spent studying. Every weekend I chose textbooks over parties. I remembered the sound of my father's alarm clock going off at 4 a.m. for his early shift. Their investment in my education wasn't just financial. It was their dreams for a better future channeled through their youngest daughter. At Berkeley, I excelled beyond everyone's expectations, including my own. I graduated summa cum laude with a double major in business administration and computer science, and immediately landed a position at Goldman Sachs in San Francisco. But even as I climbed the corporate ladder, I could see massive inefficiencies in how financial institutions handled wealth management technology. Traditional banks were using systems that were decades behind what was possible. Wealthy clients were frustrated with outdated platforms that couldn't provide real-time insights into their portfolios. I spent 3 years at Goldman learning everything I could about high-net-worth financial management while secretly developing my own revolutionary software platform. The breakthrough came when I realized that artificial intelligence could be used to predict market trends and automatically rebalance portfolios in ways that human analysts simply couldn't match. But more importantly, I discovered how to make this technology accessible and user-friendly for clients who weren't tech-savvy. At 26, with $40,000 in savings and a burning vision, I left Goldman Sachs to found Aurora Financial Technologies. The name came from my grandmother's middle name. Aurora meant dawn in Latin, and I was convinced I was creating the dawn of a new era in financial management. The first 18 months were absolutely brutal. I worked from a tiny studio apartment in Oakland, surviving on instant ramen and determination. I faced rejection after rejection from venture capitalists who couldn't understand why they should invest in a young Latina woman with no prior entrepreneurial experience. Many meetings ended with condescending questions about whether I had considered finding a more experienced male co-founder. Their doubt only fueled my determination. I bootstrapped the company using freelance programming contracts, working 16-hour days to build both my software platform and my client base. I remember celebrating my first major client, a tech executive who trusted me to manage his $2 million portfolio. by buying myself a single cupcake from the bakery downstairs. Everything changed when the 2016 market volatility hit. While traditional wealth management firms watched their clients lose millions, my AI-driven platform had predicted the downturn and automatically moved portfolios to safer investments. My clients not only avoided losses but actually gained money during one of the most turbulent periods in recent market history. Word spread like wildfire through Silicon Valley's wealthy elite. Within 6 months, I had $50 million in assets under management. Within 2 years, it was $500 million. By my 30th birthday, Aurora Financial Technologies was managing over $2 billion in client assets, and my personal stake in the company was worth hundreds of millions. The financial press called me a wealth management prodigy and the future of fintech. Forbes featured me on their cover as one of the most influential women in finance. But despite all the external success and recognition, there was something missing in my personal life. I was incredibly successful professionally, but I worked so much that I barely had time for relationships. I'd gone on dates, of course, but no one seemed to understand the demanding nature of building a company from scratch. Most men were either intimidated by my success or seemed more interested in my net worth than in me as a person. That's what made meeting Marcus feel so different, so special, so real. When we first crossed paths at a charity gala in Napa Valley 3 years after I founded Aurora, he was the first man who seemed genuinely interested in my mind rather than my money. He asked thoughtful questions about financial technology, challenged my ideas respectfully, and never once mentioned my company's valuation or my personal wealth. Marcus worked as an investment banker for a prestigious firm in San Francisco, so he understood the demands of the financial world without being threatened by my success. He was sophisticated, charming, and had this way of making me feel like I could be both a successful CEO and a woman in love. Little did I know that this charming, understanding man would become the greatest threat to everything I had worked so hard to build. It took a lot of care and time to prepare and narrate this for you, so if you're enjoying it, a quick subscribe really helps and means the world to us. All right, let's get back to it. After graduating from UC Berkeley, I thought, my Goldman Sachs position would be the launching pad for my dreams. Instead, it became a masterclass in frustration. Every day, I watched brilliant financial strategies get buried under layers of bureaucracy and outdated thinking. The firm's wealth management technology was essentially digital paperwork, impressive looking, but functionally obsolete. I'd sit in client meetings watching millionaires squint at confusing portfolio reports that told them nothing about real-time market opportunities. These were successful entrepreneurs and executives who had built empires, yet they were being served by financial platforms that looked like they belonged in the 1990s. The disconnect was staggering. During my lunch breaks, I'd sketch out ideas for what wealth management could look like if we actually leveraged modern technology. What if artificial intelligence could analyze thousands of market variables simultaneously? What if clients could understand their financial position with the same clarity they had about their businesses? What if portfolio management could be predictive rather than reactive? My supervisors at Goldman weren't interested in revolutionary changes. Elena, my manager would say dismissively, our clients value tradition and stability. They don't want experimental technology managing their money. But I knew he was wrong. These clients weren't traditional. They were innovators in their own industries. They were just stuck with traditional financial services. The final straw came during a presentation to a tech CEO who had built a $500 million company. He was frustrated because his current wealth manager couldn't explain why his portfolio had lost money during a quarter when his industry knowledge told him it should have gained. I knew exactly what algorithms could have prevented those losses, but company policy prevented me from implementing anything beyond their standard offerings. That night, I made the decision that would change everything. I was going to build the financial technology platform I knew the world needed, even if it meant starting from zero. with $40,000 in savings, every penny I had managed to accumulate during my 3 years at Goldman, I gave my notice and rented a 400-square-foot studio apartment in Oakland. The place was barely bigger than my childhood bedroom, but it would serve as both my home and Aurora Financial Technologies' first headquarters. The early days were absolutely brutal in ways I had never anticipated. I was no longer the promising Goldman Sachs analyst with a steady paycheck and expense account. I was an unemployed woman with a laptop, a dream, and rapidly dwindling savings. Some mornings, I'd wake up questioning whether I had made a catastrophic mistake. My daily routine became monastic in its discipline. I'd wake up at 5 a.m., do an hour of coding on my financial algorithms, then spend the morning cold calling potential clients who rarely returned my calls. Afternoons were dedicated to improving the software platform, and evenings were spent taking freelance programming contracts to pay rent and buy groceries. The rejections came in waves. Venture capitalists would listen to my pitch with barely concealed skepticism. "You're asking us to invest in unproven technology developed by someone with no entrepreneurial track record," one partner told me bluntly. "Why don't you find an experienced male co-founder to lead this company while you handle the technical side?" Another investor suggested I consider working for an existing fintech company instead of trying to build my own. "Wealth management is a relationship business," he explained condescendingly. "Clients want to trust their money with someone who looks like them." The implication was clear. A young Latina woman wasn't what wealthy clients expected. These rejections stung, but they also crystallized my determination. I wasn't just building a software platform. I was proving that innovation could come from unexpected sources. Every no became fuel for working longer hours and refining my technology. The technical challenges were immense. I was essentially trying to build 3 different systems simultaneously: the AI engine that would analyze market data, the user interface that would make complex financial information accessible, and the security infrastructure that would protect millions of dollars in client assets. Some nights I'd code until 3 a.m., then spend the remaining hours troubleshooting errors that seemed impossible to solve. Money became a constant source of anxiety. I calculated every expense down to the dollar. Ramen noodles weren't just cheap. Food. They were a strategic choice that allowed me to allocate more resources toward software development. I canceled my gym membership, stopped buying coffee out, and wore the same 3 professional outfits to every client meeting. My lowest point came 8 months after founding Aurora, when my savings hit $3,000 and I still had no paying clients. I remember sitting on my apartment floor, surrounded by printouts of code and financial projections, seriously considering whether I should abandon everything and look for another corporate job. That same week, I received an email that changed everything. David Chen, a tech executive I had pitched months earlier, was facing a major financial decision. His startup was about to go public, and he needed sophisticated wealth management for his $15 million windfall. His current advisor had recommended a conservative approach that would have generated modest returns, but my analysis showed a completely different opportunity. Using my AI platform, I demonstrated how strategic diversification across emerging markets could potentially double his returns while actually reducing risk. The presentation took 3 hours, during which David asked increasingly complex questions about my algorithms and market predictions. Unlike the VCs who had dismissed my technology, David understood exactly what I had built. "Elena," he said, "at the end of our meeting, I don't care about your age or your experience. This platform is the most sophisticated financial analysis I've ever seen. I want you to manage my entire portfolio." That first $15 million client contract saved Aurora Financial Technologies. More importantly, it validated everything I had believed about the future of wealth management. David's trust allowed me to prove my technology worked in real-world conditions, generating returns that exceeded every benchmark. Word began spreading through Silicon Valley's tight-knit network of successful entrepreneurs. David recommended me to 2 other executives who were looking for innovative financial management. Each new client brought bigger portfolios and more complex challenges that pushed my technology to evolve rapidly. By the end of my first year, I was managing $50 million in client assets and finally paying myself a modest salary. The studio apartment in Oakland was getting cramped as I hired my first employee, a brilliant data scientist named Sophia, who believed in my vision enough to leave her stable job at Apple. The breakthrough that would establish Aurora as a major player came during the market volatility of early 2016. Traditional wealth managers watched helplessly as their clients' portfolios lost millions during the unexpected downturn. My AI system, however, had detected subtle pattern changes in market behavior weeks before the crash. While other firms were scrambling to minimize losses, my platform had automatically shifted client portfolios toward defensive positions and alternative investments. Not only did my clients avoid the devastating losses that hit most investors, but many actually gained money during one of the most turbulent periods in recent financial history. The results were impossible to ignore. David Chen's portfolio gained 12% during a quarter when the S&P 500 lost 8%. My other clients saw similar outperformance that defied conventional wisdom about market timing and risk management. Within 6 months of that market triumph, I had $200 million in assets under management and a waiting list of potential clients. Aurora Financial Technologies had evolved from a desperate gamble into a legitimate threat to established wealth management firms. The financial press began paying attention. Forbes published a profile calling me the algorithm queen of wealth management. The Wall Street Journal featured Aurora in their FinTech Innovation series. Bloomberg invited me to comment on the future of artificial intelligence in financial services. But the real validation came from my clients themselves. These were sophisticated investors who had seen every type of financial innovation. They weren't impressed by media coverage or industry recognition. They cared about results. And my results spoke for themselves. By age 30, I had built something that 3 years earlier had existed only in my imagination. A financial technology platform that could consistently outperform human analysts while making complex wealth management accessible to clients who had previously been underserved by traditional firms. Aurora Financial Technologies was managing over $800 million in client assets, and my personal stake in the company was worth hundreds of millions. I had proven that innovation could disrupt even the most established industries, that determination could overcome institutional bias, and that sometimes the biggest risks led to the most extraordinary rewards. But success, I was about to learn, would bring challenges I had never anticipated, including threats from people I trusted most. Meeting Marcus Delacroix felt like stumbling upon something rare and genuine in a world that had become increasingly artificial. It was at the annual Napa Valley Children's Hospital Charity Gala, an event I typically attended more out of obligation than enthusiasm. As Aurora's success grew, these social functions became necessary for networking, but I often found myself surrounded by people who were more interested in my company's valuation than in meaningful conversation. That evening was different. I was standing near the silent auction display, examining a wine collection donation, when someone beside me said, "The 2014 Bordeaux is exceptional, but I'd be curious about the storage conditions. Temperature fluctuations can destroy even the finest vintage." The voice belonged to a tall, elegantly dressed man with intelligent dark eyes and an easy smile that seemed completely unforced. "Are you a wine expert?" I asked, genuinely intrigued by his technical knowledge. "Investment banker by day, wine enthusiast by passion," he replied, extending his hand. "Marcus Delacroix. I manage portfolios for high-net-worth clients at Meridian Capital, but I collect wines as a hobby. There's something fascinating about how time and careful attention can transform something good into something extraordinary." What struck me immediately was that Marcus didn't seem to recognize me. In these circles, my face had become familiar from magazine covers and conference speaking engagements. People usually approached me with predetermined agendas, seeking investment advice, partnership opportunities, or simply wanting to associate with Aurora's success. Marcus was simply making conversation about wine. We spent the next hour discussing everything from the intricacies of Burgundian terroir to the parallels between wine appreciation and financial markets. Marcus had this remarkable ability to listen intently, asking follow-up questions that showed he was genuinely processing and building upon our conversation rather than waiting for his turn to speak. "What do you do?" he finally asked as we moved toward the dinner tables. "I run a financial technology company," I replied, deliberately understating Aurora's scope. "Fintech is fascinating," Marcus said, his eyes lighting up with genuine interest. "The intersection of technology and finance is revolutionizing everything. Are you working on anything particularly innovative?" For the next 30 minutes, I found myself explaining Aurora's AI-driven wealth management platform with more enthusiasm than I had felt in months. Marcus asked sophisticated questions about algorithmic trading, risk assessment models, and client interface design. His queries demonstrated not just politeness, but actual comprehension of complex financial technology concepts. What amazed me was that throughout our entire conversation, Marcus never once asked about Aurora's valuation, my net worth, or whether we were seeking investors. He seemed fascinated by the intellectual challenge of what I had built rather than its financial implications. By the end of the evening, Marcus had asked for my number, and I had given it without hesitation, something I rarely did at these events. Our first official date was at a small Italian restaurant in Sausalito that Marcus chose specifically because it was quiet enough for genuine conversation. He arrived with a bottle of wine from his personal collection and apologized for not picking somewhere more impressive. "I thought you might prefer actual conversation over Instagram-worthy ambiance," he said with that same easy smile. He was absolutely right. We talked for 4 hours about everything except business, our childhoods, travel experiences, books we'd recently read, philosophical questions about technology's impact on human relationships. Marcus shared stories about growing up in New Orleans, his close relationship with his grandmother, who had taught him to appreciate fine wine, and his struggle to balance his demanding career with personal interests. When he finally asked about my work in detail, it was with the same genuine curiosity he had shown about my thoughts on literature and travel. Marcus wanted to understand not just what I did, but why I was passionate about it. He listened as I explained how Aurora was democratizing sophisticated wealth management, making it accessible to successful people who had previously been underserved by traditional financial institutions. "You're not just building a business," he observed thoughtfully. "You're solving a problem that you personally experienced and felt passionate about fixing. That's the foundation of every truly innovative company." His insight was exactly right, and the fact that he understood this fundamental motivation meant everything to me. Over the following months, our relationship developed with a natural rhythm that felt refreshing after years of dating men who were either intimidated by my success or transparently interested in leveraging it. Marcus had his own successful career, his own professional identity, and his own financial security. He didn't need anything from me except my company and attention. Marcus introduced me to aspects of life I had neglected during Aurora's intense growth phase. He was an accomplished cook who would prepare elaborate weekend dinners while explaining the provenance of ingredients and wine pairings. He had season tickets to the San Francisco Symphony and would share the historical context of pieces we were hearing. His knowledge of art history led to museum visits where I discovered I had developed strong aesthetic preferences during years of focusing solely on business metrics. What impressed me most was Marcus's emotional intelligence. He understood when I needed to work late on urgent client matters without taking it personally. He celebrated Aurora's victories with genuine enthusiasm and offered thoughtful support during challenging periods. When I was stressed about a particularly complex algorithmic problem, Marcus would listen patiently to my technical explanations. and ask clarifying questions that often helped me think through solutions. 6 months into our relationship, Marcus suggested we spend a long weekend at his family's cabin near Lake Tahoe. The property had been in his family for 3 generations, a rustic but elegant retreat where his grandmother had taught him to appreciate both solitude and intimate companionship. We hiked mountain trails during the day and spent evenings by the fireplace, sharing stories about our dreams for the future. It was during that weekend that Marcus told me he was falling in love with me. Not with Aurora's CEO, not with my financial success, but with Elena, the woman who got excited about algorithmic elegance, who had strong opinions about wine and literature, who was simultaneously ambitious and thoughtful. I've dated successful women before, he said as we watched the sunset over the lake. But I've never met someone who was so comfortable being both brilliant and vulnerable. You've built something extraordinary professionally, but you haven't let that success make you afraid of authentic connection. His words touched something deep within me. For years, I had worried that my professional intensity might make me incompatible with genuine romantic partnership. Marcus proved that assumption wrong. When Marcus proposed 18 months later, he did it at the same Napa Valley charity gala where we had met. He had worked with the event organizers to arrange a private moment in the vineyard during sunset. The ring was his grandmother's, an elegant vintage design that reflected his appreciation for meaningful tradition rather than ostentatious display. "Elena," he said, his voice filled with emotion, "you've shown me that love and ambition aren't competing forces. They can enhance each other when 2 people truly understand and support what the other is building. I want to build a life with you that honors both your dreams and ours together." I said yes without hesitation, knowing that I had found someone who valued both my professional achievements and my personal authenticity. Our wedding, held at a private estate in Sonoma County, was intimate and elegant. Marcus insisted on keeping the guest list small, immediate family and closest friends only. "This is about us," he said during the planning, "not about networking or impressing clients. I want our wedding to reflect the genuine connection we've built." The early years of our marriage seemed to validate every hope I had harbored about finding a true partnership. Marcus and I developed routines that honored both our demanding careers and our commitment to each other. We would start each day with coffee together, sharing highlights from our schedules and offering support for anticipated challenges. Evenings became sacred time when we would cook together, disconnecting from our phones and focusing on genuine conversation. Marcus showed remarkable understanding about Aurora's demands. When client emergencies required weekend work or late-night problem-solving sessions, he would bring me dinner and ask thoughtful questions about the challenges I was addressing. His support felt genuine rather than dutiful, born from authentic interest in my work rather than mere spousal obligation. In retrospect, I realized that Marcus's questions about my business were more detailed and frequent than I had initially recognized. At the time, I interpreted his curiosity as evidence of his genuine engagement with my professional life. He would ask about new client acquisitions, technological developments, and strategic planning with what seemed like supportive interest. "How do you decide which new markets to enter?" he would ask during our evening conversations. "What criteria do you use for evaluating potential partnership opportunities? How do you protect Aurora's intellectual property when working with larger financial institutions?" His questions were sophisticated and demonstrated impressive understanding of business strategy. I appreciated having someone who could engage with the complexity of what I was building rather than just offering generic encouragement. Marcus also showed keen interest in our personal financial planning. He suggested we work with estate planning attorneys to ensure our assets were properly structured for tax efficiency and future security. He recommended wealth management strategies that would optimize our combined resources while protecting both Aurora's growth potential and our personal financial independence. "We should be strategic about how we structure our finances," Marcus would say. "You've built something incredible, and we want to make sure it's protected and optimized for long-term growth. His advice seemed prudent and caring, reflecting his professional expertise in wealth management and his personal investment in our shared future. Looking back now, I can see patterns that should have concerned me. But at the time, Marcus's behavior seemed like evidence of a supportive partner who was genuinely invested in both my success and our relationship's foundation. The warning signs were subtle but present from the beginning, hidden beneath layers of charm, sophistication, and apparent genuine affection that would take me years to properly decode. The shift in our marriage was so gradual that I initially attributed it to the natural evolution of any long-term relationship. After 4 years of what I had considered marital bliss, Marcus began displaying subtle changes in behavior that I rationalized as career-related stress or the ordinary adjustments that couples make as they mature together. Aurora Financial Technologies had reached a critical growth phase, managing over $3.2 billion in client assets with expansion plans into European markets. The demands on my time had intensified significantly, requiring frequent travel for client meetings, regulatory compliance sessions, and strategic partnerships with international financial institutions. Marcus, meanwhile, had been promoted to Senior Managing Director at Meridian Capital, overseeing their ultra-high net worth client division. We're both at pivotal points in our careers, I told myself when Marcus began working increasingly late evenings and weekends. This is temporary pressure that successful couples navigate together. But the changes went beyond scheduling conflicts. Marcus's questions about Aurora's operations became more focused and technical. During our dinner conversations, he would probe for specific details about client acquisition strategies, proprietary algorithm development, and expansion financing structures. His inquiries felt more like business intelligence gathering than spousal interest. The European expansion sounds complex, he would say casually while we shared wine on our terrace. How are you structuring the regulatory compliance across different jurisdictions? What about intellectual property protection when you're licensing technology to international partners? At the time, I appreciated having a partner who could engage with Aurora's sophisticated business challenges. Marcus's background in investment banking provided valuable perspective on strategic decisions I was considering. His questions seemed supportive, even insightful. More concerning was Marcus's evolving attitude toward our personal finances. He suggested we restructure our asset allocation to optimize tax efficiency, recommending financial instruments that would provide greater liquidity and flexibility. These conversations always centered on protecting and maximizing our combined wealth, framed as prudent financial planning for our future together. Elena, you've built something extraordinary, Marcus would say during these discussions. We should make sure our personal financial structure reflects the sophistication of your business success. Estate planning, asset protection, international diversification. These aren't just technical details. They're foundational elements of long-term wealth preservation. His recommendations made logical sense, and I trusted his professional expertise. Marcus arranged meetings with estate planning attorneys, tax specialists, and wealth management advisors who presented complex but apparently beneficial restructuring options. I signed documents that Marcus assured me would optimize our financial position while protecting Aurora's continued growth. The emotional distance began manifesting in smaller, more personal ways. Marcus became less physically affectionate, less interested in our shared hobbies, less engaged during conversations that weren't related to business or financial planning. Our evening routines, once filled with intimate discussion about books, travel dreams, and philosophical questions, increasingly focused on logistical coordination and professional updates. When I suggested weekend getaways to reconnect, Marcus would cite urgent client commitments or important networking events. When I proposed couples activities we had previously enjoyed, wine tastings, museum visits, cooking elaborate meals together, he seemed distracted and eager to return to his laptop or phone calls. Marcus, are we okay? I asked one evening. after he had spent our entire dinner checking emails and responding to text messages. "Of course we're okay," he replied without looking up from his device. "I'm just managing some complex client situations that require immediate attention. The Rothschild portfolio restructuring is happening this week, and the Singapore regulatory requirements are more complicated than we anticipated." His explanations always sounded reasonable, backed by specific details that demonstrated genuine, professional demands. I wanted to believe that our emotional distance was temporary, a natural consequence of two ambitious people navigating challenging career phases simultaneously. The real warning sign should have been Marcus's sudden interest in Aurora's disaster recovery and succession planning protocols. He began asking detailed questions about what would happen to the company if I were unable to fulfill my CEO responsibilities due to illness, accident, or other unforeseen circumstances. "It's just good business practice," Marcus explained when I questioned his focus on these scenarios. "Every successful company needs robust continuity planning. What if something happened to you? How would Aurora's operations continue? Who has authority to make critical decisions? How are your intellectual property rights protected?" These conversations made me uncomfortable, but Marcus framed them as evidence of his care for both my personal well-being and Aurora's long-term stability. He suggested we work with corporate attorneys to formalize succession planning documents that would ensure smooth business operations under any circumstances. "I love you too much to let you build something this valuable without proper protection," Marcus would say. These are the kinds of safeguards that responsible executives implement, especially when they have both personal and fiduciary responsibilities to consider. Looking back, I realized that Marcus was methodically gathering intelligence about Aurora's vulnerabilities while positioning himself to benefit from any scenario where my leadership might be compromised. But at the time, his concerns seemed like evidence of a devoted husband who was thinking strategically about our shared future. The crisis that would expose the true nature of our relationship came unexpectedly during Aurora's most demanding period. We were finalizing our European expansion, negotiating partnerships with 3 major financial institutions, and launching an innovative cryptocurrency wealth management platform that had attracted international attention. I had been working 16-hour days for 3 weeks straight, managing complex regulatory negotiations while overseeing the technical development of new algorithmic trading capabilities. The stress was enormous, but I felt energized by Aurora's growth trajectory and the innovative solutions we were bringing to market. On a Tuesday morning in late September, I was presenting Aurora's quarterly performance results to our board of directors when I experienced what I initially thought was fatigue-related dizziness. The conference room seemed to tilt slightly, and I had difficulty focusing on the financial projections displayed on the screen. "Elena, are you feeling all right?" asked Sarah Kim, Aurora's chief technology officer and one of my most trusted colleagues. "Just tired," I replied, attempting to continue the presentation. "We've been pushing hard on the European integration, and I think I need more sleep." But 30 minutes later, during a detailed discussion about cryptocurrency regulatory compliance, I felt a sharp stabbing pain behind my left eye that was unlike anything I had ever experienced. The pain was so intense that I had to grip the conference table to remain upright. "Something's wrong," I managed to say before the room began spinning violently. The next thing I remember clearly was waking up in the emergency room at UCSF Medical Center with Marcus holding my hand and looking appropriately concerned. Dr. Patricia Hernandez, the attending neurologist, explained that I had suffered a severe migraine triggered by a combination of stress, sleep deprivation, and what appeared to be a minor vascular irregularity that required immediate monitoring. "Mrs. Delacroix," Dr. Hernandez said, "you've been pushing your body beyond its limits. The neurological episode you experienced was your brain's way of demanding immediate rest and medical attention. We need to keep you here for observation and run comprehensive tests to rule out more serious underlying conditions." The diagnosis was both relief and terror. Relief that I hadn't suffered a stroke or brain tumor, but terror that Aurora's most critical expansion phase would continue without my direct oversight. The timing couldn't have been worse. European. Regulatory approvals were pending, major client meetings were scheduled, and the cryptocurrency platform launch required daily technical decisions that only I fully understood. "How long will I need to stay here?" I asked Dr. Hernandez. "At minimum, 48 hours for observation and testing. Potentially longer if we discover any underlying neurological issues that require treatment." Marcus immediately positioned himself as my advocate and Aurora's interim decision-maker. He assured Dr. Hernandez that he would handle all business communications and ensure that I had complete rest during my recovery period. "Don't worry about Aurora," Marcus told me as I was moved to a private room. "I'll coordinate with Sarah and the executive team to make sure everything continues smoothly. Your only job is to focus on getting better." His concern seemed genuine and protective. Marcus arranged for flowers, contacted my parents in Sacramento, and managed the stream of well wishes from Aurora's employees and clients. He fielded phone calls from business partners and assured everyone that my condition was temporary and that Aurora's operations would continue without interruption. What I didn't realize at the time was that Marcus was using my medical crisis as an opportunity to position himself as Aurora's temporary leader, while gathering information that would prove crucial to plans I knew nothing about. Over the next 3 days, while I was confined to the hospital bed undergoing neurological tests and receiving treatment for severe stress-related symptoms, Marcus essentially took control of my business communications. He assured clients that Aurora's services would continue uninterrupted, coordinated with our legal team on European expansion details, and represented himself as my authorized representative in all business matters. Marcus has been incredible. I told Sarah when she visited on the second day. "I don't know how I would handle this crisis without his support." Sarah nodded politely, but I noticed a slight hesitation in her expression that I attributed to her natural concern about my health, rather than any reservations about Marcus's temporary leadership role. By the time I was discharged with strict instructions to limit my work schedule and avoid high-stress situations for at least 2 weeks, Marcus had inserted himself into Aurora's decision-making processes in ways that seemed protective and supportive, but were actually positioning him to access information that he had no legitimate business knowing. The woman who left UCSF Medical Center was physically recovered but professionally vulnerable in ways that I wouldn't understand until it was almost too late. My recovery at home was supposed to be a period of rest and gradual return to normal activities. Dr. Hernandez had been clear about avoiding stress and limiting my work responsibilities for at least 2 weeks. Marcus had transformed our Monterey home into what felt like a luxury medical retreat, arranging for a private chef, daily housekeeping, and even a massage therapist to help with my stress-related muscle tension. "Your only job is to get completely better," Marcus said each morning before leaving for his office in San Francisco. "Aurora is in excellent hands with Sarah and the executive team. I'm coordinating everything to make sure you don't need to worry about a single business detail." For the first week, I genuinely appreciated Marcus's protective approach. The medication for my neurological symptoms made me drowsy and unfocused, so I spent most days reading, taking gentle walks through our gardens, and catching up on rest that I had been neglecting for months. Marcus would return each evening with updates about Aurora's operations, always emphasizing that everything was proceeding smoothly and that my absence was being managed seamlessly. But as my physical symptoms improved and my mental clarity returned, I began feeling restless about being completely disconnected from Aurora during such a critical expansion phase. The European regulatory approvals were still pending, and I knew that several complex technical decisions would require my direct input. "I think I'm ready to start reviewing some basic reports," I told Marcus during our second week. "Nothing stressful, just staying informed about our progress." "Absolutely not," Marcus replied firmly. Dr. Hernandez was very specific about avoiding work-related stress. Aurora has survived and thrived for 8 years because you built an excellent executive team. Trust them to handle things for a few more days. His insistence seemed caring, but something in his tone felt controlling rather than protective. For the first time since my hospitalization, I wondered whether Marcus was being overly cautious about my recovery, or whether he had other reasons for wanting me disconnected from Aurora's daily operations. That suspicion crystallized into concern when Sofia Martinez, my longtime assistant, and one of my most trusted employees, called me directly on my personal phone on a Friday afternoon. "Elena, I'm sorry to bother you during your recovery," Sofia said, her voice carrying an unusual tension. "But there are some things happening at Aurora that I think you should know about." "What kind of things?" I asked, immediately alert despite the lingering effects of my medication. "Marcus has been coming to the office almost daily, meeting with department heads and asking for detailed information about client portfolios, proprietary algorithms, and our expansion financing. He's representing himself as your authorized representative, but some of these requests go beyond normal coordination." My heart rate accelerated as Sophia continued. "Yesterday, he asked me to prepare a comprehensive report on Aurora's intellectual property assets, including valuation estimates and licensing agreements. When I suggested we wait for your approval, he said you had specifically requested this information for estate planning purposes. I had never requested any such report, and Marcus had never mentioned estate planning that would require detailed intellectual property valuations. More concerning was the realization that Marcus was accessing confidential business information that he had no legitimate reason to need. "Sophia, I want you to be very careful about what information you share with Marcus going forward," I said, trying to keep my voice calm despite my growing alarm. "Don't discuss this conversation with anyone else, but please document exactly what he's been requesting." After hanging up with Sophia, I sat in our home office staring at the computer that I had barely touched since returning from the hospital. Something was happening at Aurora that Marcus wasn't telling me about, and his insistence on keeping me completely disconnected from business operations suddenly seemed suspicious rather than protective. That evening, when Marcus returned home, with his usual cheerful reports about Aurora's smooth operations and my recovery progress, I decided to test my growing suspicions. "I spoke with Sophia today," I said casually during dinner. "She mentioned that you've been spending a lot of time at Aurora's offices." Marcus's expression remained carefully neutral, but I noticed a brief hesitation before he responded. "I've been coordinating with the executive team to make sure all critical decisions are handled properly. You've built such a sophisticated operation that it requires constant communication to maintain your standards." She said you've been asking for detailed information about our intellectual property assets. "Estate planning requirements," Marcus replied smoothly. "Remember our discussions about optimizing our asset protection strategies? The attorneys need comprehensive documentation of Aurora's value and structure to complete the recommendations we discussed." His explanation sounded reasonable, but something about his tone felt rehearsed, as if he had prepared answers for questions he anticipated I might ask. The next morning, Marcus left early for what he described as important client meetings in Boise, San Francisco. As soon as his car disappeared down our driveway, I opened my laptop and logged into Aurora's internal systems for the first time since my hospitalization. What I discovered made my hands shake with a combination of rage and disbelief. Marcus had been using his temporary access to Aurora's operations to systematically gather intelligence about our most sensitive business information. The computer logs showed that he had accessed client databases, downloaded proprietary algorithm, documentation, and reviewed confidential financial projections that were restricted to C-level executives only. More disturbing were email threads between Marcus and several people I didn't recognize, discussing asset valuation timelines and documentation requirements for dissolution proceedings. The language was coded, but the implications were becoming terrifyingly clear. I called Sophia immediately. I need you to come to the house right now, I said. Bring all the documentation about Marcus's requests, and don't tell anyone where you're going. Sophia arrived within 40 minutes, carrying a thick folder of printed emails and meeting notes. As we sat in my home office reviewing the evidence, the scope of Marcus's deception became undeniable. He's been meeting with divorce attorneys, Sophia said quietly, showing me a printed email thread she had discovered by accident. I was looking for files he had requested when I saw correspondence with Hamilton, Sterling and Associates. They specialize in high-asset divorce cases. The email chain that Sophia had printed was devastating. Marcus had been working with divorce lawyers for at least 3 months, providing them with detailed information about Aurora's value, my personal assets, and potential vulnerabilities in our marital property structure. One email from the law firm's senior partner read, "Based on the financial documentation you've provided, we estimate the marital estate value at approximately $847 million. The challenge will be establishing your contributions to Aurora's growth during the marriage period. Continue gathering evidence of your involvement in strategic decisions and business development activities." Another email, sent just 2 days after my hospitalization, contained Marcus's response. "The medical situation provides an excellent opportunity to document my essential role in Aurora's operations. I'm positioning myself as interim decision-maker to establish precedent for my operational contributions. Timeline for filing should be after European expansion completion to maximize asset valuation." I read the emails 3 times, unable to process the calculated nature of Marcus's betrayal. He wasn't just planning to divorce me. He was using my medical crisis as an opportunity to build his case for claiming half of Aurora Financial Technologies, the company I had built from. Nothing before I ever met him, but the worst revelation was yet to come. Hidden in a separate email thread was correspondence between Marcus and someone named Isabelle Rousseau, a wealth management executive from a competing firm in Switzerland. "Darling," Marcus had written to Isabelle, "the timeline is accelerating. Perfectly. Elena's hospitalization provided the access I needed to document Aurora's complete operational structure. Once the divorce is finalized and I secure my stake in the company, we can move forward with our plans for Meridian Alpine Partners." Isabel's response was equally devastating. "I can't wait to see you next month in Zurich, the private banking. Contacts I've cultivated will be perfect clients for our new venture. Aurora's proprietary algorithms will give us a significant competitive advantage once you have legal access to the intellectual property." The betrayal was comprehensive and calculated. Marcus wasn't just planning to divorce me and claim half my company. He was planning to steal Aurora's technology and start a competing firm with his mistress, using my innovations as the foundation for their new business. I sat motionless, in my office chair, staring at the emails that had destroyed every assumption I had held about my marriage, my husband, and my security. The man I had trusted with my heart, my home, and my business had been systematically planning to destroy everything I had built while pretending to care for my recovery. The physical pain from my neurological condition was nothing compared to the psychological devastation of understanding that my husband had been my enemy for months, possibly years, while I had believed we were building a life together. Sophia sat quietly beside me as I processed the full scope of the deception. Finally, she spoke the words that crystallized my determination. "Elena, what are you going to do?" I looked up from the emails, feeling something cold and focused settling over me. The devastated wife was disappearing, replaced by the strategic thinker who had built Aurora Financial Technologies from a $40,000 investment into a billion-dollar enterprise. "I'm going to protect everything I've built," I said quietly. "Marcus has made the mistake of thinking that because I loved him, I'm weak. He's about to discover exactly how wrong he is. The woman who had trusted completely was gone forever. In her place was someone who understood that the greatest threats often come from those closest to us, and that survival sometimes requires becoming more ruthless than those who seek to destroy us. Marcus had planned carefully, but he had underestimated the intelligence and determination of the woman he was betraying. His carefully constructed scheme was about to encounter a strategic mind that was more sophisticated than anything he had anticipated. The transformation from devastated wife to strategic warrior happened faster than I had thought possible. Within hours of discovering Marcus's betrayal, the same analytical mind that had built Aurora Financial Technologies was now focused on a different kind of problem: how to protect everything I had created from someone who had intimate knowledge of both my business and personal vulnerabilities. I spent that first night after the discovery in a state of cold, methodical planning. While Marcus slept peacefully beside me, completely unaware that his scheme had been exposed, I lay awake cataloging every piece of information he had accessed, every document he had reviewed, and every strategic advantage he believed he possessed. By 3 a.m., I had identified the 3 critical elements of my counter-strategy: speed, secrecy, and legal precision. Marcus's plan depended on the assumption that I would remain ignorant of his intentions until he was ready to strike. That advantage was now mine. The next morning, I maintained my role as the recovering patient, accepting Marcus's kiss goodbye and his cheerful assurances about managing Aurora's operations during my continued absence. The moment his car left our driveway, I made the first of several calls that would determine the outcome of this war. "David, I need to see you immediately," I said to David Chen, who had become not just Aurora's first major client, but one of my most trusted advisors. "Can you come to my house this morning? It's urgent, and I need absolute discretion." David arrived within 90 minutes, his expression shifting from concern to grim determination as I laid out the evidence of Marcus's betrayal. As a successful entrepreneur who had navigated his own corporate challenges, David immediately understood both the personal devastation and the business implications. "This is corporate espionage in addition to marital fraud," David said after reviewing the email evidence. "Marcus isn't just planning to divorce you. He's planning to steal Aurora's intellectual property and compete against you using your own innovations." "I know," I replied, "which is why I need your help assembling a team that can move faster than his legal strategy." David's connections in the Bay Area's professional network proved invaluable. Within hours, he had arranged discreet meetings with 3 individuals whose expertise would be crucial to protecting Aurora: Patricia Vance, a divorce attorney who specialized in high-asset cases involving business founders; James Liu, a corporate security expert who had helped several tech companies protect against intellectual property theft; and Maria Santos, a forensic accountant who specialized in tracing hidden assets and documenting financial fraud. By evening, my kitchen table had been transformed into a war room where 4 of the most strategic minds I knew worked to dismantle Marcus's carefully constructed plan. Patricia's analysis was both reassuring and sobering. California is a community property state, which creates challenges, but Aurora's structure gives us significant advantages. The company was fully established and profitable before your marriage, and you've maintained clear separation between marital assets and business assets. Marcus's biggest vulnerability is that he has no legitimate claim to intellectual property that predates your relationship. What about his argument that he contributed to Aurora's growth during the marriage? I asked. That's where we need to be surgical in our documentation, Patricia replied. We need to prove that Aurora's expansion was driven by your technical innovations and business decisions, not by any contributions Marcus made. Has he ever held an official position with the company, been listed on patents, participated in board meetings? Never, I said firmly. I was very deliberate about keeping our professional lives separate. James Liu's security assessment was more concerning. Marcus has accessed enough confidential information to potentially reverse engineer some of Aurora's competitive advantages. If he's planning to start a competing firm with this Isabel person, they could launch with insider knowledge that took you years to develop. Can we prove that he accessed this information inappropriately? I asked. Absolutely. Every login, every file download, every email access is logged in Aurora's systems. I can generate a comprehensive audit trail that documents exactly what confidential information Marcus accessed and when. This evidence will be crucial for both the divorce proceedings and any potential criminal charges for corporate espionage. Maria Santos's financial analysis revealed the most encouraging news. Marcus's strategy depends on establishing that Aurora's current value represents marital property subject to division. But your asset structure is more sophisticated than he apparently realizes. The intellectual property holding company you established in Delaware has remained completely separate from any marital assets. The Swiss licensing subsidiary you created for European operations has no connection to your personal finances. Marcus's lawyers are working with incomplete information. Meaning? I asked. Meaning that the $500 million empire he thinks he can claim half of is actually structured in ways that protect the core value from marital property claims. He may be entitled to a portion of certain assets acquired during the marriage, but Aurora's fundamental value, the technology, the client relationships, the intellectual property, remains yours. Over the next 48 hours, we developed a comprehensive counter-strategy that would unfold in 3 phases. Phase 1 involved securing Aurora's intellectual property and client relationships before Marcus could complete his intelligence gathering. Phase 2 required documenting his unauthorized access to confidential information and building both civil and criminal cases against him. Phase 3 would involve the controlled revelation of his betrayal at the moment when it would cause maximum damage to his position while providing maximum protection for Aurora. James Liu implemented immediate security measures that were invisible to Marcus, but would prevent any further unauthorized access to Aurora's systems. We're not changing anything that would alert him to our awareness, James explained, but we're logging every action he takes and limiting his access to information that could be used against Aurora in the future. Patricia Vance began preparing divorce paperwork that would flip Marcus's strategy completely. Instead of being served with his carefully planned petition, Marcus would find himself responding to divorce papers that documented his unauthorized business activities and demanded immediate injunctive relief to protect Aurora's confidential information. The key is timing, Patricia emphasized. We file first, with evidence of his corporate espionage, which puts him in a defensive position from the beginning. His lawyers will be scrambling to respond to our allegations instead of executing their planned offensive strategy. Maria Santos worked with Aurora's financial team to create a comprehensive asset audit that would clearly establish which resources were marital property and which remained my separate assets. When Marcus's lawyers demand financial discovery, they're going to find that Aurora's structure is far more sophisticated than their preliminary research indicated, Maria explained. This will force them to completely recalculate their strategy. Perhaps most importantly, we identified Marcus's critical vulnerability: his relationship with Isabelle Rousseau and their planned competing venture. The email evidence showed that Marcus was sharing Aurora's confidential information with someone outside the United States, which elevated his actions from marital misconduct to potential international corporate espionage. This gives us leverage that Marcus doesn't know we have, Patricia noted. If he pushes too hard on claiming Aurora's assets, we can expose his plans to steal intellectual property for a competing firm. The reputational damage alone would destroy his career in investment banking. By the end of our planning weekend, I felt a sense of control that I hadn't experienced since discovering Marcus's betrayal. The team we had assembled understood both the personal and professional dimensions of what Marcus was attempting, and our counter-strategy addressed every element of his plan, while creating new vulnerabilities he hadn't anticipated. Elena, David said as our final planning session concluded, Marcus made a fundamental error in judgment. He assumed that because you trusted him personally, you would be naive about protecting yourself professionally. He's about to discover that the strategic thinking that Built Aurora is more than capable of defending it. The most crucial element of our strategy was maintaining absolute secrecy while Marcus completed his intelligence gathering. We needed him to feel confident about his plan's progress, while we systematically dismantled his advantages and built our own offensive capabilities. Over the next week, I continued playing the role of the recovering patient, while our team worked behind the scenes to implement each phase of the counter-strategy. Marcus remained cheerfully confident about his control over Aurora's operations, providing me with daily updates that I now understood were designed to keep me compliant and uninformed. The European expansion is proceeding smoothly, Marcus would report each evening. Sarah and the executive team are handling everything professionally, and our international partners are impressed with Aurora's continued operational excellence during your recovery. What Marcus didn't know was that Sarah, Kim, and I had been in constant communication through secure channels that James Liu had established. Aurora's operations were indeed proceeding smoothly, but under my direction rather than Marcus's assumed leadership. By the end of that week, our counter-strategy was fully prepared and positioned for execution. Marcus's careful plan was about to encounter a response that was more sophisticated, more comprehensive, and more devastating than anything he had anticipated. The woman he had underestimated was about to become his most formidable opponent. The moment I had been preparing for arrived on a foggy Tuesday morning in early October. Marcus left the house at his usual time, kissing me goodbye with the same practiced affection he had maintained throughout his months of deception. He mentioned having important client meetings in San Francisco and wouldn't be home until evening. The perfect timing for what Patricia Vance had planned. At precisely 10:30 a.m., while Marcus was presenting investment strategies to unsuspecting clients at Meridian Capital, a process server arrived at his office with divorce papers that would shatter his carefully constructed timeline and expose the full scope of his betrayal. I wasn't there to witness his initial reaction, but Sarah Kim called me within minutes of the serving. "Elena, you should know that Marcus just received some papers at his office. From what our contacts at Meridian Capital are saying, he looked like he'd seen a ghost. He immediately canceled all his afternoon meetings and has been locked in his office making frantic phone calls. The divorce petition that Patricia had prepared was a masterpiece of legal strategy. Rather than simply seeking dissolution of marriage, the documents formally accused Marcus of corporate espionage, unauthorized access to confidential business information, and conspiracy to steal trade secrets for the purpose of establishing a competing enterprise. Each allegation was supported by detailed evidence that James Liu had compiled from Aurora's system logs. More devastating was the emergency restraining order that accompanied the divorce papers. The court had granted our request for immediate injunctive relief, prohibiting Marcus from accessing any Aurora facilities, communicating with Aurora employees, or using any confidential information he had obtained during his unauthorized intelligence gathering. But the nuclear weapon in our legal arsenal was the final section of the petition. A detailed exposition of Marcus's relationship with Isabelle Rousseau and their planned venture, Meridian Alpine Partners. We had included copies of their email correspondence, evidence of his sharing Aurora's proprietary algorithms, and documentation of their strategy to recruit Aurora's clients for their competing firm. The first sign that our strategy was working came when Marcus called me at 2 p.m., his voice strained with barely controlled panic. "Elena, we need to talk immediately," he said, the smooth confidence I had known for 5 years replaced by obvious desperation. "There's been some kind of misunderstanding with legal papers that were delivered to my office today." "What kind of legal papers?" I asked innocently, as if I had no knowledge of the divorce petition currently dismantling his world. "Divorce papers that make completely false accusations about my business activities. This is obviously some kind of mistake or malicious legal action by someone trying to damage both of us." The irony of Marcus accusing someone else of malicious legal action wasn't lost on me. "I haven't filed any divorce papers, Marcus. Perhaps you should speak with an attorney about whatever you received." "Elena, Please don't play games. These papers claim I've been accessing Aurora's confidential information inappropriately and planning some kind of competing business venture. You know those allegations are completely fabricated. Are they? I asked quietly, allowing a note of steel to enter my voice for the first time. The silence on the other end of the phone was telling. When Marcus finally spoke, his tone had shifted from panic to calculation. I'm coming home immediately. We need to discuss this face to face. Actually, Marcus, I don't think you should come home right now. I'm feeling quite unwell, and my doctor has recommended avoiding stressful situations during my recovery. This was the moment when Marcus realized that his careful manipulation of my medical condition was now being used against him. If he insisted on coming home despite my stated medical needs, he would appear callous and controlling. If he stayed away, he would lose the opportunity to gauge how much I actually knew about his activities. Elena, as your husband, I have a right to come to our home to discuss these serious legal allegations with you. As someone recovering from a stress-related neurological condition, I have a right to control who has access to my medical sanctuary. I suggest you speak with your attorney about the appropriate way to address these legal matters. Marcus arrived, at our house anyway, but he found our driveway blocked by a Monterey County Sheriff's deputy who was enforcing the restraining order. The court had granted our request for Marcus to be temporarily excluded from our marital residence due to the evidence of his deceptive behavior and the potential for further harassment or intimidation. I watched from our bedroom window as Marcus argued with the deputy, gesticulating wildly and clearly demanding access to his own home. The conversation lasted 15 minutes before Marcus stormed back to his car, his face flushed with rage and humiliation. That evening, Patricia Vance called with an update that confirmed our strategy was working perfectly. Marcus's attorney, Jonathan Hamilton, requested an emergency meeting to discuss settlement options. When I explained that we had evidence of international corporate espionage and were considering criminal charges, Hamilton became very interested in negotiating, rather than litigating. What kind of settlement are they proposing? I asked. Nothing yet. Hamilton is still absorbing the scope of evidence we've presented. But he did mention that Marcus is claiming the allegations are exaggerated, and that he was only gathering information for legitimate estate planning purposes. And your response? I showed him the emails between Marcus and Isabel Rousseau discussing their plans to steal Aurora's algorithms for Meridian Alpine Partners. Hamilton requested a 48-hour recess to fully review all evidence and consult with his client about potential responses. The next 48 hours revealed the complete collapse of Marcus's professional and personal position. News of the divorce filing and corporate espionage allegations spread through San Francisco's tight-knit financial community with devastating speed. Meridian Capital immediately placed Marcus on administrative leave, pending an internal investigation of the serious accusations against him. 3 major clients requested that their portfolios be transferred to other managing directors, citing concerns about Marcus's judgment and ethical standards. The firm's senior partners called an emergency meeting to discuss potential liability for employing someone accused of stealing trade secrets from his wife's company. More damaging was the international dimension of Marcus's betrayal. When news reached Isabel Rousseau in Switzerland that their planned venture had been exposed in legal proceedings, she immediately distanced herself from both Marcus and Meridian Alpine Partners. Her bank released a statement clarifying that they had no knowledge of any inappropriate information sharing and were cooperating fully with American authorities investigating potential violations of international trade secret laws. Marcus's attempts to control the narrative failed spectacularly. His initial strategy of claiming the allegations were exaggerated collapsed when James Liu provided additional evidence of his unauthorized system access. Computer logs showed that Marcus had downloaded over 500 confidential files, including client lists, proprietary trading algorithms, and strategic planning documents that he had no legitimate reason to access. On Thursday evening, Marcus made one final attempt to salvage his position by arriving at Aurora's offices and demanding to speak with me. Sarah Kim, who had been prepared for this possibility, calmly informed him that he was prohibited from Aurora facilities under the court's restraining order, and that any further contact attempts would result in criminal charges for violating a judicial order. The security footage of Marcus being escorted from Aurora's building by private security guards quickly circulated through Silicon Valley's professional networks. The image of a previously respected investment banker being removed from his wife's company became symbolic of his spectacular fall from grace. By Friday, Marcus's legal position had deteriorated beyond any possibility of recovery. Jonathan Hamilton called Patricia Vance to request a meeting about mutually acceptable resolution terms, which we all understood meant Marcus was ready to surrender. "He wants to settle quickly and quietly," Patricia reported after the call. "Hamilton is concerned about potential criminal charges and wants to minimize his client's exposure to further legal consequences." "What are they offering?" I asked. "Complete withdrawal of any claims to Aurora's assets, agreement to comprehensive non-disclosure terms regarding all confidential information he accessed, and acceptance of significant financial penalties for his unauthorized activities." The man who had planned to claim half of my empire was now begging to escape with minimal consequences for his betrayal. "And what about Isabelle Rousseau and Meridian Alpine Partners?" "Marcus has provided written confirmation that he never shared any Aurora proprietary information with foreign contacts and that no competing venture was actually planned. He's essentially denying that the email evidence we have is real, which gives us additional leverage." The final irony was that Marcus's surrender came on the same day that Aurora received formal approval for our European expansion. The regulatory documents that Marcus had been so interested in accessing were now public information, and Aurora's international growth would proceed without any interference from his sabotage attempts. As I reviewed the settlement terms that would end both my marriage and Marcus's threat to Aurora, I felt a profound sense of closure. The man who had tried to destroy everything I had built had instead destroyed only himself, while Aurora emerged stronger and more secure than ever. Marcus had learned the most expensive lesson of his life, underestimating the strategic intelligence of the woman whose trust he had betrayed. 6 months after the settlement was finalized, I stood in the floor-to-ceiling windows of Aurora Financial Technologies' new headquarters in downtown San Francisco, watching the morning fog lift over the bay. The building itself was a symbol of how dramatically my life had transformed. A sleek 40-story tower that housed not just Aurora's expanding operations, but also the new divisions we had launched in the aftermath of Marcus's failed betrayal. Tadachan. Legal resolution had been swift once Marcus realized the futility of his position. He agreed to relinquish any claims to Aurora's assets, accepted a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement that prohibited him from using any confidential information he had accessed, and paid substantial financial penalties that we donated to organizations supporting women entrepreneurs who had faced similar betrayals. More importantly, Marcus provided signed affidavits confirming that he had never actually shared Aurora's proprietary information with Isabelle Rousseau or any foreign contacts, despite the incriminating emails we had discovered. This legal fiction allowed him to avoid potential international criminal charges while giving Aurora ironclad protection against any future claims involving our intellectual property. The divorce decree recognized Aurora Financial Technologies as my separate property, established before marriage and maintained independently throughout our relationship. Marcus retained ownership of assets he had brought to the marriage and a fair portion of jointly acquired property, but he walked away with none of the wealth he had planned to steal. Perhaps most satisfying was the complete collapse of Meridian Alpine Partners before it ever launched. With Marcus's professional reputation destroyed and Isabelle Rousseau distancing herself from any association with him, their planned competing venture died before it could threaten Aurora's market position. The experience fundamentally changed my approach to both business and personal relationships, but in ways that made me stronger rather than more cautious. I had learned to trust strategically rather than blindly, to verify important commitments rather than simply believing them, and to build protective systems that didn't require sacrificing authentic connections. Aurora's growth in the months following. The settlement exceeded every projection we had made. Our European expansion, which Marcus had tried to sabotage, became the foundation for Aurora's emergence as a truly global financial technology leader. By the end of the year, we were managing over $5.8 billion in client assets across 3 continents, with proprietary algorithms that had become the industry standard for AI-driven wealth management. More importantly, the crisis had revealed the extraordinary loyalty and competence of Aurora's executive team. Sarah Kim's promotion to Chief Operating Officer was accompanied by equity stakes that made her a genuine partner in Aurora's continued success. Sophia Martinez, whose discretion and courage had been crucial to exposing Marcus's betrayal, became Aurora's Director of Executive Operations with responsibilities that reflected her proven trustworthiness. Elena, Sarah said during one of our weekly strategy meetings, I know the divorce was devastating personally, but Aurora has never been stronger. The team's confidence in your leadership has grown enormously since they saw how you handled the crisis. She was right. The employees who had witnessed my strategic response to Marcus's betrayal understood that they were working for someone who could protect Aurora against any threat, internal or external. Our retention rates reached all-time highs, and our recruitment efforts attracted candidates who specifically wanted to work for a CEO known for both innovation and integrity. The personal healing process was more complex than the business recovery, but ultimately more rewarding. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the therapist I began seeing after the divorce, helped me understand that Marcus's betrayal wasn't a reflection of my judgment, but of his character. Learning to separate those 2 concepts was crucial to rebuilding my confidence in future relationships. Betrayal reveals the betrayer, not the betrayed, Dr. Walsh reminded me during our sessions. Your capacity for trust isn't a weakness. It's what enabled you to build Aurora's collaborative culture and inspiring leadership style. The goal isn't to become cynical, but to trust more strategically. That strategic approach to trust became evident when I began dating again, almost a year after the divorce was finalized. Miguel Hernandez, an environmental law professor at UC Berkeley whom I met through a mutual friend, represented everything Marcus had pretended to be: genuinely intellectual, authentically supportive, and completely uninterested in my financial status. Our relationship developed slowly and deliberately. Miguel knew about Aurora's success, of course, but he was more interested in my thoughts about environmental policy and social responsibility than in my company's valuation. For our 3rd date, he suggested volunteering together at a local food bank, an activity that revealed character in ways that expensive restaurants never could. I appreciate that you're building something that has positive impact beyond profit, Miguel said during one of our early conversations. But I'm more interested in who you are when you're not being a CEO. His perspective helped me rediscover aspects of myself that had been overshadowed by Aurora's demands and Marcus's manipulation. I started painting again, something I had abandoned since college. I began hiking the coastal trails near Monterey, finding peace in natural beauty that had nothing to do with business metrics or financial performance. The relationship with Miguel also benefited from lessons I had learned about maintaining appropriate boundaries. We kept our finances completely separate, shared household responsibilities equally, and made decisions collaboratively rather than one person deferring to the other's assumed expertise. Most importantly, I never again allowed romantic love to compromise my professional judgment or business security. Aurora remained mine, protected by legal structures that no future relationship could threaten. The broader impact of my experience extended beyond personal growth and business success. I began speaking publicly about the intersection of entrepreneurship and relationship security, helping other successful women understand the importance of protecting their achievements from potential exploitation. The Elena Castellano Foundation, which I established with a $50 million endowment, provides legal and financial support to women entrepreneurs who face betrayal from business partners, spouses, or family members. The foundation's first year helped 127 women protect their businesses and rebuild their lives after various forms of professional or personal betrayal. What happened to me happens to women every day, I explained during the foundation's launch event. The difference is that I had the resources and expertise to fight back effectively. This foundation ensures that other women have access to the same strategic advantages, regardless of their individual circumstances. The speaking engagements and foundation work also gave me perspective on how common Marcus's behavior actually was. I heard from dozens of women who had faced similar betrayals. Husbands who had attempted to claim credit for their wives' innovations, business partners who had tried to steal intellectual property, family members who had exploited trust for financial gain. Each story reinforced my understanding that betrayal often comes from those closest to us, not because they're inherently evil, but because proximity provides the greatest opportunities for exploitation. The solution isn't isolation, but strategic awareness and protective planning. Today, as I prepare to take Aurora Financial Technologies public with a projected valuation of $12 billion, I reflect on the journey that brought me here. Marcus's betrayal, which once seemed like the end of everything I had built, actually became the catalyst for Aurora's most significant growth and my own personal evolution. The company that Marcus tried to destroy is now worth 24 times what he had attempted to steal. Aurora's success validates every decision I made about protecting my intellectual property, maintaining business independence, and responding strategically rather than emotionally to existential threats. More importantly, the experience taught me that authentic strength comes not from avoiding vulnerability, but from building systems that allow vulnerability without sacrificing security. I can love deeply while protecting wisely, trust genuinely while verifying strategically, and build meaningful relationships while maintaining appropriate boundaries. The woman who discovered her husband's betrayal in a hospital bed has become someone who understands that the greatest victories often emerge from the deepest challenges. Trust can be rebuilt, but wisely. Success is sweetest when it's protected intelligently. And sometimes the collapse of what you thought you wanted creates space for what you actually need. For anyone watching who might be facing their own betrayals or challenges, remember that the people who try to destroy what you've built often reveal your strength rather than your weakness. The strategic mind that created your success is more than capable of protecting it. What experiences have taught you the most about trust and protection? How did you rebuild after betrayal? Share your stories in the comments below. If this story inspired you to think differently about success, relationships, and strategic thinking, please like this video and subscribe for more real stories about resilience, innovation, and the power of refusing to be underestimated. Remember, your greatest achievements are worth protecting, your trust is worth giving strategically, and your future is always brighter than any betrayal can dim. Coming up next, you'll see 2 more stories we handpicked just for you. If this one struck a chord, you're going to love what's next. Tap to keep the journey going.